This episode of Basic Brewing Radio is brought to you in part by the American Homebrewers Association, host of HomebrewCon, a 3-day extravaganza celebrating the most delicious hobby in the world. This year's HomebrewCon heads to Portland, Oregon, one of the beeriest towns in America. This June 28th through June 30th, meet your homebrew heroes, enjoy amazing beer, and level up your brewing skills. Details at homebrewcon.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, May 10th, 2018. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week we catch up with Jesse Gagnon, who used to be head brewer at Ozark Beer Company, but he's taken a step away from the bigger brewery to take the brewing reins at the tiny West Mountain Brewing Company. Why the change? We'll get insight on that, along with great tips on brewing some of the tasty beers that he has on tap now at West Mountain. If you go into basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, our DVDs, our brewer's logbooks, and other basic brewing gear, and you can get free stickers when you order stuff from there. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. And if you do us the favor of rating us on iTunes and maybe leaving a nice comment there, they say that'll help new listeners to find us. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. This week I'm planning to post an early release of our Basic Brewing video episode featuring my 30-minute juicy rye beer. I added flaked rye to a short boil beer that had all the hops added after the boil to see what the adjunct would bring to the hoppy party. If you subscribe to Patreon or are a legacy PayPal subscriber, you'll get that a week before everybody else does in the general public. I want to welcome a new sponsor to the podcast, Poncho's Keg Cooler from Poncho's Brewing Lab down in Texarkana, Texas. What's Poncho's Keg Cooler? And that's cooler with a K. Well, it's an idea that I wish I'd come up with first. Imagine a cylindrical insulated water cooler, but imagine if it were 20 gallons and designed to hold a 5-gallon corny keg. Well, Pancho Lozano came up with this idea because he was tired of messing with jockey boxes, the cleaning, the keeping the lines balanced, and knowing that his keg was sitting out in the summertime heat away from the ice in the box when he was using the jockey box. So, Pancho's solution is to keep the keg in with the ice and mount a tap on this giant, beautiful cooler. And you can keep up to a 2.5-pound CO2 tank in the cooler with the keg along with the regulator, or you can run a line out to a bigger tank. It fits either ball lock or pin lock kegs and requires only a 10-pound bag of ice if your keg is already cold from your kegerator. Pancho sent me one, and I love it. I tried it out with a cookout on the patio this past weekend, and it worked like a charm. I'll post photos on Instagram and Twitter. After 2 days, I want to tell you, there was still ice in the keg cooler, and the beer was still cold. And even better, between parties, you can convert your Pancho's Keg Cooler into a 20-gallon mash tun. So multiple use item. Very cool. Check out this cool, innovative product at ponchosbrewinglab.com. That's PANCHOS Brewing Lab, all one word, .com. If you use the code BBR when purchasing, you'll save $20. And look for Poncho's Keg Cooler, that's cooler with a K, at HomebrewCon in Portland. Once again, ponchosbrewinglab.com, and use the code BBR when you purchase, and you'll save $20. And thanks to Poncho for sponsoring the show, and that is a really nifty item. I'm excited about it. Let's take a look into the mailbag. Mark in Wolverhampton in the UK writes, inspired by one of your podcasts, I've been making hopped kombucha. The hop flavor one gets, I find, is lovely, fresh, and fruity, particularly with citrusy hops. Mark says, I recently made a beer that I was less than satisfied with. It started out as an English ale, but the yeast did not start for some reason, so I threw in a dry Saison yeast that fermented quite well. But I still felt there was something missing. It was just a little plain and flabby. Mark says, it needed a bit of brightening up. That's when I thought of kombucha. I'd made it with Citra. It was carbonated and had a nice tartness. I mixed a little in the beer, about 20% kombucha, and the result was delicious. Mark says, I instant dry hopped Belgian sour is what he came up with. Mark says, I wonder if a brown ale could be transformed into a Flanders red. Well, that sounds like fun and delicious. Steve and I definitely had fun with my hopped kombucha experiments on the video side, and I think it's a great idea to try something like a radler. It may taste like a radler, by blending kombucha with beer. That's definitely on my list of things to try. I think I told you last time about my planned brew day using leftover hops and my electric brew-in-a-bag system from our sponsors and friends Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. Well, the day went great. The brew day went great. I moved the system into the garage away from the rain and storms, which moved through periodically through that day. And that's something that I personally would hesitate to do with my old propane burner. You may remember the chat I had with the guy from the propane industry back in January of 2009, and he recommended against doing that, having those big propane burners inside, even though, many of you do. With electric brewing, you don't have to vent propane fumes. You don't have to worry about, freak accidents with propane lines inside your house or garage. And brewing with electricity, as a bonus, is very quiet. Also, if it's windy, you don't have to worry about the wind stealing your heat because all of the energy goes directly into the kettle, into the wort. And when was the last time you had to run to the convenience store to get another bottle of electricity when you ran out halfway through the boil? Electric brewing takes the pain out of propane, and High Gravity is the place to go for a variety of turnkey electric setups from 5 gallons to 2 barrels and an assortment of Warthog controllers to fit your needs. I love my High Gravity system, and Desiree and Dave are great to work with. Check all the electric brewing solutions at highgravitybrew.com and use the promo code EBC75BB to save $75 off your electric brewing purchase. Family owned and operated, highgravitybrew.com. Okay, I love talking to brewers around Northwest Arkansas, and I love following their progress as they make their way through the brewing world. And Jesse Gagnon is taking advantage of an opportunity to step back and to hone his brewing skills at West Mountain Brewing, where he ponders which path to take next. In the meantime, he's brewing up some tasty stuff. Well, Jesse Gagnon, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Great to have you here, James.
Now, we are here at West Mountain. Last time I talked to you on the mic was in August of last year up at Ozark Brewing Company with Andy Coates. And I went back and listened to that last night. Boy, that was a fun conversation. There was a lot of good brewing information in there, a lot of good tips, and we sipped on a 2015 BDCS, yes, which was super delicious. And I forced you to drink one of my homebrews on Mike. So
it was fine. It was delicious, for the record.
Well, you're kind enough to say that. So you are, as I count, the 5th brewer here at West Mountain. So we had Andy Coates, who fixed the equipment after it sat idle for like 10 years. Then Will Gillespie came in, our friend Will Gillespie. He's working on the West Coast now, I understand, last time I talked to him. Ryan Pickup is now at American Solera in Tulsa, yes, and brewing some amazing beers. Casey Letillier is starting up Ivoryville up in Siloam Springs. And now you left, a cushy job at Ozark to come down here and be your own brewmaster here in this tiniest brewing facility. So before we get into why you did that, where do you come from? We didn't get into that in the last conversation. How did you get into beer?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the woods of Maine, actually up in central Maine. In high school, my family actually moved to Arkansas, to a little town called Evening Shade. If you've heard of it, I think some of the TV show with Burt Reynolds was filmed about 100 yards from here, from what I've been told. From there, my 20s get sketchy, like a lot of people. I did some time out in Colorado, did a lot of time back in Maine. I started really getting into craft beer in the Front Range of Colorado, and my brother and I did a little bit of home brewing In Maine, he was more the brains of the outfit. I was more the drinker of the outfit. That was a long time ago. I just remember actually cooling off the wort in a snowbank in the middle of the winter, and I think he still does a little bit of brewing. But so I always had an interest in craft beer, and I moved back from Colorado to the Midwest, and I moved to Springfield. And when I
Springfield, Missouri.
Springfield, Missouri.
Every state's got one, apparently.
Gotta specify. Moved to Springfield and was there with my best friend. He said, a brewery just opened up here in town. And I had some money saved up, like every good transient young man. And I said, well, I'm going to try to get on at this brewery because I bet it would just be a blast. And that brewery was Mother's Brewing Company. They had just opened up a few months before that, and I went down there and basically worked my way into that business model, crawling and scratching one step at a time. So, yeah, that's sort of where my foray into this craft started.
So how far did you get at Mother's?
Boy, that's a complex question. I was there about 3 years, and it was the first 3 years. Somehow I've managed to find myself at up-and-coming breweries, which are a totally different model than existing breweries, and ones that are successful in finding their own pace in the market. So I started out volunteering on the packaging line and working part-time as a bartender. And then within about 3 months, there was some changes in the company, and I became the tasting room manager. And then also got hired on in packaging to actually supplement my hours there. So I was always a utility player there. And by the time I left, I'd been managing the tap room for about 2 years while working my way into being their second shift brewer. Really their first shift brewer. There was the head brewer, Doug Riddle. And they were running out of time for him to do everything, so they brought me on, and that's where I got my training. So by the time I left, I'd done a lot of things there. They called me their utility player, but yeah.
Well, it's a good lesson for people who want to get into professional brewing. I've had 2 sips of beer. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm already slurring.
It's solid 5% alcohol right there.
But you hear all kinds of stories of professional brewers that started out washing kegs and doing sort of menial tasks and working their way into it. You generally don't start unless you start your own brewery as the head brewer. So
yes, no, and that's for sure. This business really has a unique place for people who are willing to be self-motivated, and so I would encourage anybody wanting to get into this industry. Don't walk into a tap room and say, hey, I'll do anything, I'll sweep floors, because a lot of people do that, but not a lot of people pick up a broom and just make themselves available. So, yeah, it still works in this industry.
And I'm sipping on the first of 6 beers this morning, starting out the day right. And this is the Smash beer?
Yeah, so that's a single malt and single hop beer that was the request of John, the owner. I wanted something super straightforward. It's 2-row malt. It's about 5.3% alcohol, I think. But I showcased crystal hops in this, which, in my experience, crystal hops can get sort of like European noble hop varieties. If you overdo it, you're not going to like it. And so I knew I had to keep it pretty tuned down in this beer. So yeah, it's a pretty straightforward, very drinkable beer for going into the spring and the hot months here. So yeah, what do you think?
I like it. I like simple beers. I've been doing a lot of smash beers or smash-ish beers lately. It's nice. It's you say noble. I say juicy. There's a lot of grapefruit, citrusy flavors in there, and the malt is there, but it doesn't get in the way of the hoppiness. The bitterness is nice and firm and balanced, and man, I could drink that all day, which is, I guess, is the purpose.
That was definitely the purpose. There's when you've been in this industry a while, you you just want to make something drinkable, and I'm sure it's the same for home brewers as well. Making something clean and drinkable is much more important than making something that just pushes all the envelopes at some point. So,
what was your approach to hopping on this? What's your hopping strategy?
Yeah, like I said, I tried to keep it pretty conservative because I have heard Crystal called sort of the American noble variety. I definitely think it does have those juicy characters, but I've also just had it turn sort of harsh if you overuse it. So I think I dry hopped with about half a pound per barrel. I did a decent amount of late hopping in this guy. One thing I definitely tried to emphasize was the fact that since it's just 2-row malt without adjuncts, I really wanted to boost up the mash temp.
It's a challenge to make sessionable beers that are satisfying, but with simple tricks like mash temperature, you can do that. And this is not what I would call a simple beer. There's a lot going on there in the flavors and the mouthfeel and such as that. So it's a well-made beer and delicious.
Yeah,
so how did you get to go from Mother's to Ozark?
Yeah, so that was another one of those moments in my career that sort of crept up and then all of a sudden happened. So I was dating a fine woman, one might argue the best woman on the planet. She's now my wife. She got an opportunity to move to Siloam Springs to pursue her master's degree for free. So it was like, well, she should probably jump on that. Mm-hmm. So she moved down here, and we did the long-distance relationship for a while. I think I was ready to move on from Mother's in some capacity, and I was obviously thinking about following her down here. I've always loved this part of Arkansas, even just the theory of it. You know, you get good Ozarks culture in the hills with the Fayetteville area here. And I sort of started a gradual courtship with the people at Ozark. I don't even know if I ever told Andy this, but there was a meeting at Mother's where Mother's was moving into the territory, and I just piped up and asked the director of marketing. I said, "So who's the quality competition down there?" And what I was doing was fishing for what brewery could I pursue and still be confident that I was pursuing quality. And immediately he said, Ozark Beer Company. They're just up and coming. And I ironically met Andy in the tasting room. He came through on a really busy day with some of the Ozark family. That was years ago. And so when I finally met Andy in Northwest Arkansas, I actually remembered him from Springfield. And we just hit it off. And so when I was coming down here to see my wife, on the way back, I would drop in and just get a feel for the company. And I learned long ago to sort of have that informal interview process as opposed to filling out applications in places. And Ozark was a really, really refreshing difference from Mother's for what I needed at the time. And I hit a week in Springfield where I was just tired of being away from Ashlyn, my wife. Like I said, we were just dating, and I said, well, I think I'm going to put in my notice and head to Arkansas, come hell or high water. We'll see what happens. And I really hit that point in the AM of, I think, a Wednesday, and I got a call from Andy that evening with a job offer to come down because Andy was doing everything in production, and he needed some help. He needed somebody to brew some beer. So I was down there about, I think 4 weeks later. I tried to give Mother some good notice, so that's what brought me to Ozark. Yeah.
So I'm drinking the Saison now, right?
Yes.
Cheers, by the way.
Yes. Hang on, let me get the Saison and we'll cheers.
There we go.
Let me make sure that's a Saison. It is definitely the Saison.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's delicious. Again, I'm assuming a simple beer.
Yes.
But the yeast character is really nice. It's not, slap you in the face Saison-y, but I'm getting that, kind of Saison yeast character that I have trouble describing.
No, I know it.
But then there's a bunch of spice pepper on the back of the the tongue that I get with this, which is really nice and balances out the malt. So again, I'm assuming it's a simply brewed beer, but there's a lot going on there.
There is. I love farmhouse ales. I love saisons. I had the most fun at Ozark designing and brewing some of those. What a beautiful style, and it's no secret now in craft beer. It's no secret. So I sort of wanted to incorporate some of my passion from doing that at Ozark into this, but there's so many differences with the business models here and there as we can get into. But I had some of the, I think it's BE 134, the Belgian yeast strain, the dry yeast. I got from BSG, and Casey'd used it, and I just asked him, I said, what's up with that Saison strain? Because, these are such yeast-driven beers. And he said, it's really good. It's very straightforward. It's very clean and pleasant. And so I put together a pretty simple grain bill. I'm a real fan of, like, rustic Saisons. If I can throw raw wheat in there, I do it. So in this one, I think I had... it was simple, but at the same time, I wasn't afraid to play around with some of the kitchen sink mentality, too. I think there's Pilsner, a little bit of Vienna, and then probably a little two-row as well. And then I'm sure some adjuncts, probably some oats in this guy. And then went with some EKG hops, and I also wanted to bring in a little bit of bright American influence, and so I actually used a little bit of Cascade. And I'm a big fan of just layering in some of those nuanced flavors that might be hard to pick out in the beer, but I feel like it adds depth that can be hard to get if you're more one-dimensional.
Yeah, it's real easy when you're standing by the brew pot, especially on the homebrew scale, to say, if half an ounce of this is good, 2 ounces would be better,
right.
And then you're like, wrong. And but this is, like I say, the word mature, I guess, comes out as far as the recipe formulation. It's kind of a grown-up drink. It's not, one-dimensional. Here's here's the yeast. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot to think about. In what is it, around 5%?
Yeah, that one I think is about 5.6. I just really enjoyed playing around with saisons and more different yeast strains, and that's something I'd like to get into even more in the future. But we can get into that later.
So, what temperature did you? Yeast is subject to temperature. What temperature did you ferment this one at?
I want to say it was at 76. I typically like big ester character in saisons. I don't like it when it gets overly clove-like. So I try to keep that down a little bit. This one still shows a lot of those characters. I think it's just sort of one of those workhorse yeast strains that just wants to show that it's a saison, and it does it, So yeah, good banana character. Some of that clove character as well, though. But I definitely prefer to keep the phenols down when I can. But
yeah, I'm getting banana, a teeny tiny bit of bubble gum.
Yes, yeah.
Too much of the bubble gum to me gets offensive, but that's
unique, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like brings me back to grade school. But no, it's very nice. Nicely balanced.
Thank you.
So you were at Ozark for what? About 3 years?
About 3 years, yeah. I was trying to put it together. I think this is year 6 or 7 in this industry, and it was pretty much split between Ozark and others. And I don't know if that's just an indicator of my lasting power or not. I'm not sure. That's my stamina right there. Is 3 years.
You have a short attention span.
I guess so. Yeah, maybe that's it.
Working in the hostile environment with Andy and Lacey drove you away from the. So how did you wind up down here? I mean, we've talked about the brew space here, and this is like the third show that I've done here. or about here. It's basically a brew pub, but the brewery is in the corner of the room in probably the smallest brew space in this part of the state, right?
I would say Sean Slape down the hill is fighting me for it, but I think I still bear that title of smallest brew space. So, it's no secret that the business models are very different. That's quite apparent between the two. It's sort of a long story. If you want to go into it, we definitely can.
Give us the Reader's Digest version.
The Reader's Digest version.
The elevator pitch.
I've been in this industry about 6 years, and it's easy for me to hit a point of an existential crisis. Ozark was a great company, is a great company, and I will say, for somebody pursuing the moniker of craft brewer in Arkansas, I would still say I think I had the best position in Arkansas, which seems like there's a lot of hubris behind that statement, but I think it's more a testament to what brand Ozark has become. And so if I was just looking at furthering my career in brewing, I was on a really good trajectory there, and I think maybe that's what you're getting at, is why I burned it somehow. I think for me, there's a lot of elements of the brewing industry that it values different things than I value, and so I was wrestling with some of that. And as this industry matures, I think we'll encounter more of those questions that I've been asking. But really what I came to was that if I want to be in this industry another 20 years, I'm really not seeking to just be a big-time brewer in some well-known company, all as honored as I was to be in that position. I'm a fiercely independent person, extremely introverted, believe it or not. And so sort of what my wife and I have been tossing around is that if I'm going to be in this industry in another few decades, it sort of needs to be in an environment and in a place that speaks to my personality more. I've always been in rural settings. I'm not a city guy. I don't like a 45-minute drive to get to work unless it's coming from somewhere beautiful. And so I was looking for a way to just shake up my career and figure some things out. Casey, well, let's see, I think the manager, Jeannie here, called up Andy one day and said, Casey's getting ready to go back out to Siloam. And I should also say my wife and I live about 4 minutes from here. So we are Fayetteville people. And Andy asked me, he said, hey, do you know anybody who would be good at actually jumping in there and actually handling that as their own? And I sort of parked halfway on the way to work the next day and just rolled it over, and it was like one of those moments I can't really explain, but I was just like sitting there thinking, as far as the career goes, like I'm ready for a change. I'm ready to pursue things that speak to me. And I called up Casey, and I basically asked him, I explained the existential crisis I was going through in this industry. And I said, do you think West Mountain would be a good spot for me to sort of figure out the next step? Because for me, if I'm going to stay in this industry, it like I said, it needs to be sort of to the beat of my own drum. But I wasn't going to get that opportunity at Ozark simply because we were getting really busy. It was a very, very involved business model. And so, long story short, Reader's Digest version, talked to Andy and Lacey about it, gave them a bunch of notice, and sort of came here, and I'm on sort of a weird self-imposed sabbatical where I have plenty to learn from this place. It's a beautiful establishment that's just iconic to the downtown square.
And this is a place where you can, I assume you have a substantial amount of creative freedom I'm sure that the owner John has certain beers that he wants to have on tap, but it seems to me that you have the opportunity to kind of stretch out and do some experimentation and kind of interface one-on-one with the customers here in this environment to figure out what people like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because there was plenty of experimentation and great opportunity at Ozark. There was wonderful opportunity up there. And here, I would say I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Keep in mind, I never homebrewed. So,
wow.
I mean, like I said, I think 2 batches with my brother where he was the brains of the outfit and I was anything but. And I was the guy who shoved the pot in the snowbank, And so for me, it's a really strange trip back into beer styles that I would have discovered homebrewing 10 years ago. So I mean, it's a humbling place to be, but at the same time, it's really important to keep learning. And for me, that it might be humbling to be like, well, I've done a lot of brewing, but I'm not designing brown ales. That's a very 90s way to look at craft beer. And that was part of moving here from Ozark. It's one of the questions I had in my mind was like, how much of being on the cutting edge of the craft beer industry was me finding meaning in being the head brewer up there? How much of that was ego? And if there was any part of that was ego, I felt like it had to die for the sake of me actually finding, new ways to improve my creativity. So down here, the beers are pretty straightforward. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel simply because there's so much I can learn from just putting out a really great, strong portfolio of beers that aren't necessarily cutting edge. I would like to get into pushing that envelope a little bit more in the future. I've been here a few months now, and I feel like within a few more months, hopefully I'll find some space to start pushing that envelope, like you said. But yeah, I'm very influenced by a sense of place in brewing, and the sense of place here is just this iconic brew pub on the square, and I want to honor these people by brewing the best IPA they can find in the region.
Well, that's coming up next.
That is coming up next.
Now we're on the rye.
Yes, you're ahead of me.
Yeah, well,
Goodness sakes.
You're talking, I'm drinking.
Yeah, my bad. So
now the hops are showing up.
Yes.
It smells great. It tastes delicious. I'm one that oftentimes doesn't get the spice characteristic that people talk about when they drink a rye beer. However, we did taste an experiment sent to us by the DC homebrewers a while back, an adjunct experiment, and the adjunct that we liked the best was flaked rye, and not because it came out as being spicy, but because it accentuated the hoppiness of the beer.
Yes.
So talk about this beer.
Yeah, so this is actually something that Casey'd been doing, sort of a series of rye-influenced beers, and that was pretty much the only preliminary requirement for this little series he did last year, and it seemed to go over well here, and I thought, Casey was onto something good, why not keep it going? So really, the only thing I approached this with was, let's make a spring rye beer that's just, once again, nice and drinkable and bright, and good for spring that incorporates rye. So this guy's like 4.1% alcohol. So once again, for me, it's all about balance. I think you get too much rye in there, and it can be overwhelming unless you're literally just wanting to drink some rye.
And you'll have a stuck mash tun.
Yeah, yes, you will. Yes, you will. There were a few rice hulls that went in the mash tun for this guy.
So what was the percentage of the grist? Talk about your grain mill or bill.
Oh goodness. Let's see. This one got, once again, a little bit of Vienna, 2-row. Right. Hang on. I have some notes. Let me pull it up.
And what I just brewed yesterday a 100% Vienna pale ale, and I haven't worked with Vienna a lot. What do you get from Vienna?
So something we started using at Ozark, which I really love supplementing, especially saisons with, is the gold pills. And I just feel like it's such a smooth character that it's really hard for me to put my finger on. I wouldn't call it bready. It's just like the perfect amount of sweetness in a base, and it just adds a depth of flavor that I like to throw in there fairly often. I haven't done it a ton here, but it's it's a pretty well-known Hail Mary.
So you get your notes out here.
Yeah. Let's see. So, total I only had, like I said, it's 4.1% alcohol. I had 165 pounds. Looks like I used pale malt, 100 pounds of that, so the vast majority. And then a bag of the Vienna, and then only 10 pounds of rye flakes and 5 pounds of wheat to help out the rye as far as the body goes and whatnot. So,
wow, I'm surprised that it's that low in alcohol, and I'm assuming it's the rye that is contributing to the body of the beer.
Yes.
That's another trick that you can use to brew session beers that are completely satisfying, that you don't miss the alcohol because the beer is not thin, and it's very nicely balanced. It is a hoppy beer, but it's not in your face again. You don't get the astringency from too much bitterness, out of balance, whatever.
Yeah.
So talk about the hopping strategy too.
Yeah, so I hopped it with Magnum, just a nice, clean, straightforward bitterness. I say hopped it, I bittered it with Magnum. Let's see, I had a decent amount of late edition. I think that was Chinook and Centennial. And then it got a Cascade and Chinook dry hop. So once again, going for the bright character that has some spring-like complexity of the rye in the background there. Yeah, I get good melon character off of it. The other day I was drinking and I just got like the good part of orange rind almost. Yeah, it's been a fun beer, and I think it is very, very drinkable. Being it's sessionable, that's for sure at 4%.
Yeah, I'm planning on picking up a couple of growlers as I leave, and that's a good candidate because it's a nice, satisfying beer, and it's good to be able to drink more than a couple of a beer and not be too goofy. Yep. It doesn't take much to get me goofy, but take it from your comments that you haven't charted a definite course from this point. I mean, you don't have. When Casey came here, he was like, I know what I'm going to do. I got my brewery name picked out. I got he was like, yes. This is a stopping point. I know exactly what I'm going to do, and yep. Here we go. So this is a place for you to kind of figure things out.
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, sort of a sabbatical for me to. It's easy for me to get out of the spotlight. I don't have any form of social media. Like I said, I'm pretty introverted. The hardest part of this gig is being surrounded by glass, but at the same time working by myself. It's this really weird dichotomy. Yeah. So right now it's sort of a stopping off point, but it's also been it's a really good symbiotic relationship because this place deserves a good brewer who can come in and that the locals can be proud of. There isn't a bar in Arkansas with a more devout group of locals that come in here on a daily basis at 3 p.m. I can tell you where they'll be sitting and who they'll be and what they'll be wearing most times.
And it seems to be a crossroads of a diversity of opinion, maybe, because you've got Brian Sorensen wrote an article and talked about West Mountain, and it was awesome, and talked about you can come here and you can sit next to a college professor on one side and a blue collar worker on the other side, and each may have a different opinion, but. It seems like good beer is social lubricant in a way.
Yes. No, I feel like this is almost a 19th century version of what a pub or bar should do for a community. I wish more looked like this, to be honest. So it's an honor to be here. I have plenty to learn, and that was part of the shift from Ozark, being the head brewer up there. Responsibilities were growing because I was the head of production, but Ozark's in that place where it's growing, and if I want to do my own thing, it's going to be small scale, somewhere off the beaten path. And so the learning curve was going down for me as the responsibilities were going up. Now here, and I'm sure Casey or any of the other guys you can talk to would tell you, you're doing everything from cleaning the tap lines to dismantling every keg, cleaning it, ordering grain, ordering hops. So there was no shadow spot for responsibility to hide. It was sort of a jump in and learn quickly. So I knew that would be very valuable here. I also knew a short commute and making my own hours would be very valuable to me. And yeah, so my wife and I are sort of in the planning stages. You'll be the second person to know outside of her. For me, it was more like six years in the industry, and I was ready to sort of sit down and scratch my head and learn on my own pace out of the spotlight, and it's been really refreshing.
Speaking of refreshing, this IPA, like I said,
again,
like a
you're ahead of
segue.
me. Cheers again to
Cheers.
that.
This, in comparison to the rye, is chewy, I would say. It's delicious. It's nice and chewy. And I described Sean down at Crisis, his IPA, I described as like candy to me. And
Yes.
I think that this is similar in that there's a lot going on. It's delicious. The malt is nice and, like I said, chewy, and the hop character is the bitterness balances that. But then there's the fruity character of the hops as well. And this is, it's like candy to me.
That means you like beer, for sure.
It may be my weakness. So talk about this beer.
Yeah, so this beer, really, it's just, I feel like when it comes to IPAs, what I approached this with was my understanding of how good IPAs should work. And that's backing off the specialty grain quite a bit. I do a double IPA. There's some in the tank. I'm dry hopping it later on today. I wish you'd been back next week, because I enjoy that beer a lot. And
Who says I won't?
Yes, please do. I'll bring you some. I'll make the trip to Prairie Grove.
There you go.
And in that one, I strip out all the specialty malt. I really get tired of cloying double IPAs with any sort of caramel backbone. And with this IPA, I'm still playing with the recipe some. I've been switching up malt providers, and there's some of those, just commercial brewing things you work through. But I've dialed back the specialty quite a bit. Right now I'm using a little bit of C40. I think that was Simpson's Crystal Light, which is an excellent crystal malt. But yeah, I've tried to use some C40 in the one that's going right now, and I use a pretty low mash temp on that with a long rest, because I want it to be drier yet again. And so I've been experimenting around with like what sort of adjuncts I can actually add, and I've started using Carapils and Carafoam, some of those excellent dextrins, and a lower mash temp on this guy, because it's about 6% alcohol. So you don't need, the body I want in this comes from my grain bill and not from my mash rest per se. Let's see, and then to hop it, I hop it with Nugget as far as bittering goes, and then I hit it with 4 classic hops after that. And really my theory there is that, being on a budget here, there's 4 hops I'll always be able to source in some capacity, and with the number of hops, then it allows me to substitute if anything happens. With not packaging and distributing, I'm not really direct consistency isn't as much of a concern, so much as it's an excellent beer. So if I have to, like for this one, I prefer with some crystal hops, and I ran out of crystal for the batch you're drinking now, and but it was an easy substitution because it was not half crystal hops; it was a quarter crystal hops, if that makes sense. So yeah, and then it gets about a pound per barrel dry hop.
So what are the hops that you feature?
Let's see. In that one, a small amount of Chinook, a decent amount of Centennial, some Cascade, and Crystal. The Chinook, I love the piney character. Maybe it's because I'm from the northeast, where a lot of evergreens. I don't know, but I do find the cohumulone levels in that Chinook, if you use it too much, you get a pretty harsh bitterness. So I used to try bittering with Chinook more, and I've sort of come away from that just because there's nothing worse to me than chewing on just a harsh hop character. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
It's delicious. And now you have a version here with blood orange, and the fruit aroma, the orange really jumps out at you. And you were kind of hesitant to share this one with me. I think you I haven't tasted it yet, but is it too fruity for you?
It is for me, but I am one person drinking, you know. It's proven to be an extremely popular beer. Actually, so we were able to start distributing, which was sort of something I could try to hang my hat on. Back in January, we distributed to our first account down at Hugo's, so you can find our beer down there at that archetypal location. And like they like this because you know people enjoy the real bright fruit character crossed with the hoppiness, particularly as you get into some of the warmer drinking weather. But you know, for me, like I said, I would much rather have a straightforward saison. You know, right now lagers are the rage. I like a little more complexity than a lager if I'm drinking one or two beers. But yeah, I'll definitely drink this guy. But it's been proven way popular with people not just like me.
Well, it surprises me because it smells kind of sweet. You know, there's just orange, you know, yes. And there's a bit of the hop aroma mixed in there. And I was expecting kind of a fruit beer flavor, but it's not. It's it's more of a grapefruity character.
Absolutely.
There's a bitterness to the yes. citrus that really balances well on the flavor. So how did you get the fruit flavor in there?
Yeah, so it's straightforward. It's a puree that's in the finished beer. So you get a lot off the nose, and then the flavor you get must complement the hoppy character, because I'm not trying to cover up the fact that it's an IPA, but at the same time I'm not, I want the other character to be noticeable. So I think you achieve that. You're absolutely right about the grapefruit. It's almost like textbook grapefruit mm-hmm. flavor. You could say it's a grapefruit IPA, and people would probably believe you.
So is a fruit puree? Did you put it in at packaging?
Yes. Yeah. So
it's a challenge if you're a home brewer. You don't want to bottle that, right? Because I'm assuming there's fermentables in there.
You could. I would not be. I wouldn't be opposed to trying it. Then again, your home brewers are probably dealing with bottle bombs and whatnot.
Exactly. So if you have the luxury of controlling your temperatures and things, you could put it in the keg and
right.
refrigerate it and not have to worry so much.
Right. Or you could just put it in the bottle and leave it on your arch enemy's doorstep. And
here's a present for you.
Yeah, give it a couple of weeks.
Not recommended for legal reasons. So we've been. I don't want to run out of time before we talk about this, and that's delicious. That may be my second actual choice, because I think it's really fun, really interesting. You have a mole beer, and the mole beer is kind of a tradition. Andy started, he had a mole beer first.
Yes,
and it's kind of a tradition here.
Yeah, and that's sort of the vibe I got. So when I was at Mother's, we did Holy Mole. I don't know if they're still producing that or not. And then we got 4 peppers and a lot of other spices. I don't typically care for mole beers. I don't even know if Andy does. I don't want to out him. I know Lacey does. It's very important. And I think I was talking to Brian Sorensen for that interview when I first started, and he was like, "Are we going to see the mole come back?" And then Casey was like, "Yeah, I did a mole beer," and I was like, "Well, okay, why not?" One of the challenges on this system is that there's 2 fermenters, obviously a brew house, but there's 14 taps to fill up. So how do you diversify certain beers in order to gain handles? So what I did was I took brown ale base and then spiced it with, I think, ancho and pasilla peppers and cinnamon and a little bit of vanilla, and then cacao nibs. And let it sit, and you play around with it. It's a lot of like racking from one keg to another, like, too much cinnamon, then you find another keg and rack off of that, and real pain in the butt, to be honest with you, but there is some heat going on in the background there, too.
This is the hottest version of all those that I've tasted.
Well, and something
and it's good. I like heat.
Something I heard was, well, I wish I'd got it hotter. And I thought, okay, here we go. Challenge accepted. Yeah, so I feel like, the heat, I think, should go somewhere between nuanced and very noticeable. And here, let the drinker decide. But it's very much there on the back end. As it ages, I think it changes some. Initially, you weren't going to get heat unless you had a full pint of it, and it would gradually build. And that's pretty typical of a lot of mole beers, I feel like. So I did pour you like a full glass. This is a strange beer to end on, I'll be honest.
No, but it's appropriate that we're ending on it because I think it would have blown everything else away. It's delicious. It's lighter in body. Usually, the mole beers, it's like either a stout or a porter base, yes. And so it's more chewy and sort of more rich. This one does have the cinnamon and the vanilla character and the chocolate character and of course the pepper character, but it's a lighter body, and I think it's more appropriate for the warmer temperatures.
Yeah. As far as the lighter body goes, I definitely wouldn't be opposed to doing it with a stout because I think there's a place for that. That bigger body, bigger mouthfeel to go with some of these complex flavors. I think what I was used to in the back of my mind was probably Holy Mole from others, where I was thinking of these not as being a super chewy beer, because they're not extremely drinkable anyway. So the bigger you make them, I don't know. So yeah, I would not be opposed to trying this with a different base at all. But yeah, like you said, the brown ale's definitely lighter than it could be.
Well, this has been fun. I look forward to whatever the future brings you, because I know that it'll be delicious.
It's been fun, man. You're welcome back anytime. Please come back when that doubles out, and I'll be putting out some more beer. So come back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Jesse for the hospitality and the conversation. If you're thinking about going pro, there are many paths to take, and it's good that Jesse has taken the time to prepare himself for the next step. And we'll be watching and wishing him well along the way. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check all that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. Get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with any DVD combo, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store as well. You can find our log books where you can track and log up to 50 batches of beer. You get free stickers with every order from basicbrewingshop.com. Don't forget you can join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.